Here on the Creative Thinker Podcast, we discuss all theories, philosophy, and thought behind the creative process. And we hope that you find some inspiration along the way.
Hello and welcome to the Creative Thinker Podcast. My name is Henry Moon and I am joined by
Michael Vasquez.
Thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about dragons, everybody's favorite.
Yeah. We're going to be talking about how to use dragons in your world. We're going to be looking at a little bit of literature, a little bit of dragons in media, and how we handle dragons in our game. And then if we're up for it and feeling it at the end of the episode, we're going to maybe talk about would dragons even be in Roween? And if they are, what would that look like as we talk about a couple different types of dragons and things like that. So
It's going to be killer.
With that,
I'm stoked for this.
Yeah.
Major stokage, dude.
yeah, I'm really excited for it. And so let us begin. We're talking about dragons in literature. On a previous episode, excuse me real quick.
On all of the previous episodes, really, because I see it here in the notes, it's Aragon. It's Christopher Paolini again. Christopher Paolini's Aragon. Aragon from Christopher.
Eric, if you guys haven't heard of it, no. So I've talked a lot about the book, a lot of great things that I've taken from it, but now we're going to talk about the dragon and the relationship between the dragons and their people. So
I felt like that was pretty unique in that book.
It definitely was at the time, and there is something that one of the Kickstarters that I talked about that I backed. You're
a Kickstarter fiend, isn't that right? He just giggles.
Well, I know what I like, and they keep putting stuff out on Kickstarter. So we're going to talk about the dragon riders from Aragon, right? So from the Inhera wiki, which it's the inheritance cycle, so Inhera wiki.
Inherahiki.
The dragon riders were a coalition of elves and dragons formed at the end of a war. It had another term for it, but it's not important. To forge peace and order between elves and dragons. The riders were created because treaties between the two races would prove useless to stop fighting. A signed piece of paper meant nothing to a dragon. An irrevocable bond was wrought by the elves and the dragons. The elves provided the structure of the spell, and the dragons provided the strength, thus creating the dragon riders. So in this quote, it talks about just the elves. Humans were later added onto this pact through a magic bond that they explain in the book. But what was unique here is now there is a bond when a dragon egg hatches to a person, whether it was an elf or a human. In this world, there are also dwarves and some other creatures called urgles. And there are humans, dwarves, urgles, and the elves. Yeah.
Shades, right? Shades and the Razak. And
those are like kind of one-off creatures, and they don't have the bonds with dragons, but those are like more monstrosities. They're not like species that you would see out in the world.
Okay, fair enough. I'll shut up.
It's been a while. So what is unique here is that dragons have now bonded with a person, and there is a super special bond here that happens where the dragon and the rider communicate with each other telepathically, and there is this bond formed where your thoughts are going back and forth with each other, which is a very interesting way because the dragon can speak to other people, but they can't verbally speak and like move their mouths as words would come out. It would be a telepathic link for the dragons to communicate. So most times their person is communicating, or if allowed, the dragon will communicate to people in their minds. But I thought that was very interesting. What was the interesting thing for you when you first read dragons and their riders when we're talking about Aragon in that series?
I thought it was cool because it gives like sort of odes back to this war between the two, because we were just talking right before this about how dragons in American movies and literature are almost always depicted as these big horrible monsters that come through and destroy everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when it comes to other cultures like Japanese in particular, Japanese or Chinese?
Chinese.
I'm offending somebody.
Chinese.
Chinese?
I'm pretty sure it's Chinese.
I got to pull this up. I'm going to make somebody even more mad. You thought the Harry Potter thing was bad. You get Japan and China mixed up.
Chinese, yeah.
Okay. Whew. Close one. Now they won't be mad.
At me, because I
yeah.
said Chinese the whole time.
So the Chinese version of dragons is a spirit creature. And it's like this very sort of like wonderful thing if you come in contact with a dragon. A lot of their mythology around them is like granting wishes. And it's like this very positive thing. I would say, like, do you think Godzilla falls under a dragon?
No. It's a kaiju.
Like, yeah, I know. But, like, lore-wise,
I
you know what I mean?
see
You think
it,
it'd be in the
yeah.
family of dragons? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it would be a
It doesn't fly. It's
it
just
would
like a
it would
lizard
be like a drake.
creature.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, fair enough.
A large drake.
Yeah. I like that. Okay. Just curious, trying to be more controversial.
You're wrong.
Anyway, so I think the war between humans being sort of removed right at the beginning of the books is like, it's a very smart thing, and it's a very cool thing for the story. Because I just haven't seen that where it's like, you know, in a Dungeons and Dragons and stuff, it's more like if you befriend a dragon, it's a one-off kind of deal. Like,
yeah.
Like you're not going to have a lot of people near dragons. How to Train Your Dragon is kind of close, but at the same time, they're not really. They don't make it seem as though the dragons are as what's the word? Like with it, you know, like they're not people.
Oh, okay. Interesting. They're not as sentient, I
yeah.
guess.
Yeah, so
Or as intelligent.
Yeah. So
well, I
that's
think
what I think is different here is that there is a very intentional take on intelligence, and then there is an intentional take on, we had a war between our two peoples for years and years and years, and we finally got over it. I think that's just like a really cool way to do away with all of the cultural ideas that people bring to dragons here.
Yeah, for sure. I think as we kind of touch on some of the other dragons in media, let's go ahead and talk about some of the other dragons that we have listed here, and then we can go back and start comparing a little bit more of Aragon and D&D, and Aragon and mythology, D&D and mythology, and I even have Dragon Ball Z on here, and then of course I didn't think about it till just now, but Game of Thrones has dragons. So let's go ahead and talk about some of those. I'm gonna pull another quote from Dungeons and Dragons. Right, we talk about D&D a lot, so I'm pulling a quote straight from the Monster Manual, and this kind of aligns here with the dragon that we were talking about, like that American dragon that, you know, is always seen to be the one that everyone's hunted. I think what's the movie called, Dragonheart, where that was the first like dragon inspired and like CG, like really, I mean, at the time it felt like a good CG, you know, version of a dragon. But
what's the one with Christian Bale and Matthew McConaughey? And they're underground, dig hard, dig deep, and don't look back. Right?
I don't remember. I know of it, but I cannot remember. You look it up while I read the description of our dragons in Dungeons and Dragons, because this is gonna be the dragon for most of the audience that listens, that they either probably know this one or it's gonna sound very familiar to another dragon. So the quote: "True dragons are winged reptiles of ancient lineage and fearsome power. They are known and feared for their predatory cunning and greed, with the oldest dragons accounted as some of the most powerful creatures in the world. Dragons are also magical creatures whose innate power fuels their dreaded breath weapon and their paternal natural abilities." Sorry, that word's hard for me. Though their goals and ideals vary tremendously, all true dragons covet wealth, hoarding mounds of coin and gathering gems, jewels, and magic items. Dragons with large hoards are loath to leave them for long, venturing out of their lairs only to patrol or feed. Now, this dragon, to me, sounds like Smaug, right?
Yeah, right.
Very much like the dragon in The Hobbit. Sounds like Smaug, or at least the interpretation from what I've seen, because I actually never watched the Hobbit movies that came out.
Dang.
Yeah, but
they're entertaining.
Yeah.
They're not as good as the book, obviously.
Yeah.
But I mean, but the movies for Lord of the Rings are as good as the book, in my opinion.
Yes, yeah, I agree. So Then we have dragons in mythology. So there are so many dragons in mythology that we could start pulling from. And even in Dungeons and Dragons, the lore, we're in 5th edition, and we've been, I don't know how many years into 5th edition, but more dragons are coming out. And
so, I mean, I feel like in Dungeons and Dragons, this dragon is very functional. Like, it's a game, so it's like this is a dragon that is an obstacle between you and its wealth. And it's sort of a one-dimensional character, whereas the other one is like it's part of a culture and it's like part of a heritage and a covenant and all this stuff, and they're having to work through their racial disagreements and stuff, and and work out their bond together. And then for the Dungeons and Dragons, it's like, well, this one could kill you, and it's very intentionally hoarding stuff, and it's probably pretty smart, I mean, and we can definitely play it where. And we have in your campaign where they're intelligent enough to talk and stuff.
Oh my gosh,
so
most so there, like the point that I was like kind of going towards is in D&D, in the lore of D&D, there are so many dragons that have an intelligence. The stat block is 0 being the lowest, 30 being the absolute highest, 20 being really good. As a player character in the game, having a 20 intelligence is almost as high as you can get it without having any other magical items. And some of the dragons have 30 intelligence. And so that's like super smart, super intelligent. Those dragons are probably running gangs or, cities or things like that.
Cunning.
Yeah. And, but also in the same breath for D&D, some of these are going to be the dumber dragons who are just that obstacle to go along the way. And then again, in the mythology, there's just so many you could go through. Like there's not enough time in the day, that listen to someone else's story on each dragon and stuff. And even I want to say it's Mr. Rex on YouTube. He goes into he had a whole year of the dragon and just going into their lore and stuff. And for D&D, there's different types of dragons and different colors, each have their own lore and each have their own video on his channel. And then there are ancient dragons, the most powerful dragons, some of the strongest monsters, like it's said in the universe of D&D, are dragons. So lots of lore that we could go there, and a big swath of different types of dragons. And then of course I moved down to dragons in Dragon Ball Z. It's in the title. Dragon Ball Z, the point of, not the point of it, but one of the quests that goes on in Dragon Ball Z is to find the Dragon Balls, right? You need to find the 7 Dragon Balls, bring them together, because then you can get either 1 to 3 wishes, like you said, kind of like a genie. And each planet, what I thought was really cool, has a different type of dragon and a different set of wishes or conditions that they can use to grant their wishes. Like some dragons can't like bring people back to life, but others can. So, and then we have our Game of Thrones dragons. We have those dragons that attach to Daenerys and are more classically called wyverns because they don't have the 2 front legs, but for the entirety of Game of Thrones, those are the dragons. So for that world, those are the 3 dragons that Daenerys had. And then in House of the Dragon, there are very many more dragons, and they also kind of have this kind of imprint where the writer has to gain the trust of the dragon to be able to write it. Whereas in Aragon, there's an attachment, there's a bond, there's actually a physical representation on the palm that happens whenever the dragon bonds with its writer. So with that, again, kind of comparing and contrasting some of these dragons, what's here seems to be the most interesting dragon to you?
At the beginning, I didn't think it was going to be Aragon because, like, I've read the book and I always didn't like the dragon. I thought, like, that was my least favorite part of the book was like their interactions.
Really?
Yeah. I know, hot take, but
I mean,
I really like the books, but I always felt like that was the weakest point of it. And so I just feel like the potential story-wise is much greater in that version of events. Mm-hmm. Because I don't know, Dungeons and Dragons to me, and maybe it's because I've played it for years, that to me, I feel like dragons are always going to end up being these villainous creatures.
Yeah.
And maybe that's partly because they always are, right?
Yeah, I
Like
mean,
we were
that is very much how I've played them and the dragons y'all have interacted with, yes.
Yeah, and it's kind of like Reign of Fire was the name of that movie with
Oh,
Matthew
okay, yeah,
McConaughey
yeah.
and Christian Bale. And it's like, for that, it's like they awaken a dragon and they eat ash. That's the only thing we know about them. They're smart, but not that smart, and like they're just beasts, right? And they just burn the whole world down, kill almost everybody, and they eat all the ashes. So anytime new things grow, they just come by, blast it with fire, and eat it.
Oh, okay.
And so it's this very like bleak view of the apocalypse. Basically, they're the four horsemen, right?
Yeah.
In that story. And I feel like the Dungeons and Dragons version lends itself to that so much in my mind, and I feel like that's so tired. So I'm leaning away from that. The one that I think was probably my favorite is probably the Chinese version, where it's like it's a spirit, because that's just not the version of dragons I've been exposed to.
Yeah.
And I feel like that does fit pretty well with Saphira in that, or the Aragon version, in case you didn't read the book. Anyway,
Yeah.
I feel it fits good because it's the character of Saphira that we're attached to, and she has some functional moments in the story as well. But I mean, where she's just like carrying stuff or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like it's the character that is Saphira that we're attached to, and so I feel like there are elements of all of them that go back to the Aragon story, and that's why I like it. I feel like every trope about dragons can fit in that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think to add a little bit more context of what that dragon is, whenever it bonds to the human, it becomes, or elf or whatever the case is, it bonds to them, and then they can almost, sense each other's thoughts and things like that. And as Saphira gets older, she has like a wisdom about her, which is interesting because she's still a young dragon. And I think she meets Aragon when he's a teenager or something like that. He's also really young. And at the end of the story, he's still young, and the dragon has grown so much, but and is also wise in some ways and still immature in other ways. And I think it is very interesting. I think it's interesting the way that she talks, because she always refers to Aragon as little one or hatchling because he's still young and she's still young too. And the way that those dragons talk with each other is really, really interesting. What I think I like the most about this is being able to go into a world and into a story where you can create a bond between either your players and the dragons, or your main character and the dragon. Because like we said in a previous episode, Christopher Paolini, his whole story was a young boy finds a dragon egg. Man, could your story go anywhere with that context in almost any setting? Could you put that in a sci-fi, a western, a horror movie? Like what if the dragon, the kid finds a dragon egg in a horror movie, and the dragon starts killing everyone and everything, and is just trying to feed itself, and it becomes more of like a survive, type of story. So there's so many different ways that you can take that into your story that I think is very interesting. But I also really like the idea of a dragon rider and how many challenges you can put up, especially as a DM. And what I'm enjoying about you guys being at a higher level is that I can start throwing more crazy stuff at you guys, the stuff that DMs aren't, are kind of scared to because they might TPK people. Imagine a level 14 person with a level 14 dragon, like that would be crazy, So I think the story that you can tell, or the game that you can play with that is kind of wild. Evan has us in a campaign where we're called Tiamat's Tots, which is something I'll get to in a little bit about dragon deities. But we are dragons, but also we are level 1 characters. So if our level 1 character dies, we go into our dragon form, and our dragon form is level 1, but our dragon form has like 80 hit points still. So like we're still beefy level 1 characters. But it's just a fun way, to incorporate dragons in your world, because I've definitely rode on a dragon as my level 1 character because, we're as players having fun with it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to me because there's a lot of things that you can change about a story that doesn't change anything about the story. And dragons aren't one of those things. It's sort of like we all understand it at a very fundamental level that they're a force of nature.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure psychologically, maybe it's just because they look like snakes, but it's the amalgamation of danger.
Yeah, I think the mix of looking like a snake and also being like a cat, like a feline, like that's scary.
Yeah, and flying over your head, right? Like what's up there? If you see some bird flying overhead, you have no idea how big it is because you know how far away it is. You know, and it's like all the fears we have, or at least a good number, are the visage of a dragon, and so we understand it as soon as we see it. We understand it as soon as we hear the word, and so I don't know. I think it's when you add it into a story, how you add it in is going to change your entire story. It's not like it's raining versus it's not raining, kind of decision.
Yeah.
This is a very big deal when you add it in because it's gonna color everything. I think it's a unique property in that way.
Yeah, and I think what Aragon, the last thing I'll say about this, as far as like comparing it to some of the other dragons, is the thing that I really enjoyed about this next piece is that it could, the dragons, as we all know and we all see, they're good hunters. But like in Aragon, it really tried to push the fact that like dragons are the top dog. They are the top hunter, and they, which, for us, that makes sense. But like in the world that you create, in the story you create, like how do you prove and show that these dragons are the top dogs, that they are a force to be reckoned with, because sometimes, especially in D&D, you can get away with making your dragon seem less powerful because there's hit points attached to it. And so maybe you're level 4 or 5, people take down a group of 3 dragons, for example.
Random example.
Yeah. And so like, what does that provide about the structure of dragons? And for this, like at the time of this story in Aragon, there are only, and I don't want to spoil anything, there are only 2 dragons at the time of this story. When you start, there is Saphira, and then there is the big bad's dragon, and
that's what I think is another thing that is important to get right is just the amount. Like Reign of Fire, I think it's like hundreds and hundreds of dragons.
Oh, okay.
And then like as they run out of stuff to burn, they start dying off.
Gotcha.
And so it's like a repeat apocalypse story, right?
Yeah.
But as they die off, they get localized to where the only male is, right? And anyway, like if in a story like Aragon, you had like hundreds of dragon riders, it's suddenly not very interesting.
Yeah. It's interesting because at some point in the story or in the lore, there are, but now there are not, and it's almost, the story becomes better because of it, because there are not tons of dragons that are flying around and doing cooler stuff than your main characters are.
Yeah, and that's not that anybody really is picking apart the plot of kids movies these days, but the How to Train Your Dragon series, that's one thing I feel like they probably were upset about when they got to the second movie, because by the second movie, everybody was riding dragons.
Oh,
everybody.
Really?
And so the dragons were immediately not a plot point anymore.
Gotcha.
Right? So once everybody's got it, then it's like, okay, well, we're moving on.
Yeah.
Who cares about dragons then? If it was just stayed being Hiccup and maybe like 1 or 2 more for his friends, then that would be one thing. But to say everybody in the village, then it's like, well, there's nobody who can come against that at this point.
Yeah. I definitely think like when you have that many riders of dragons, then it becomes less cool. But when you like in y'all's campaign, y'all had a flock of dragons coming at you guys, I feel like that's probably a different mentality of like, Ooh, snap! This is not good. What?
Yeah, that was terrifying.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you and as a story point, him and his NPC brother ended up teleporting inside of a dragon, and that dragon ended up teleporting around the flock, and around them were 8 or 9 like adult magic dragons that were around you, and I'm sure that was scary.
Yes. I figured that was a TPK, so I was just going for it.
Yeah, it was close. I tried to make it.
I had to make so many rolls to get in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so now as we do talk about Dungeons and Dragons, what are some of the things that you have liked about having dragons in the game, or anything that you've read about having dragon? I know in our pirate campaign you ran a gold dragon, and I can't remember the name because it's been a while, but
I can't either. It's cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I ran it a little bit more because I don't know. I feel like the people who have wisdom in life, or the people that I look up to for having wisdom in life, seem to get more calm with age, and a little bit more caring, and a little bit more effortlessly invested in other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, if you meet somebody that's really wise, then you can tell them like 3 sentences about your life, and then they say something that's like, oh wow, I never thought of that. And it's carefully worded, but they don't use a lot of words, so it's like, that's how I try to play the dragon. Is just like, violence doesn't even, because of who the dragon is. It was like an ancient gold dragon, right?
Yeah.
So because of who the dragon is, it doesn't need to make any show of force. I forget where I read that quote, but it's like true power doesn't need to make itself known.
Yeah.
So it's one of those characters where that was what was informing the character to me. So when he met the party, it was like, yeah, they might be trying to, damage people or damage property. Who cares?
Yeah.
All those things come and go, and it's just a happy-go-lucky kind of dragon. So it's like, it ended up just sort of hanging out with you guys for a while, because y'all were doing something interesting.
Yeah.
And if you've been around that long, how much is interesting anymore? Like, these people are entertaining. I'm going to hang out with them for a bit, so that was the kind of character that I was playing for the dragon. And in hindsight, I feel like that's kind of one-dimensional, where I feel like, what I left out in character creation was that character's intent. So, like, again, if you've been around that long, then you have plenty of irons in the fire. You probably got tons of projects. You got things that you want to work out a certain way.
Yeah.
And I think I had him leave a couple times from you guys, but you would think, he's probably got a lot of shit going on, so he's probably got to check up on things every now and then, take off. And so I feel like I left that edge out of the character that makes you wonder whether or not it's a good character or not, which I think you would if you met somebody that was that old.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think it's fun having it in a campaign, like as a player playing through it. It's that danger, but it's also like the way you've played it for us is sort of like but I also play like a warrior character, so it's like there is a mutual respect between our party and most of the dragons we run into. It's like, yeah, we kill most of the dragons we run into, but there is a mutual respect. There's an appreciation that we're both at the point that we're at, to where we can even have a fair fight.
And one of the things that I really like about Dungeons and Dragons is the fact that some of the dragons can have spells. And I think that is an interesting component, that in Aragon, a dragon can cast a spell, but it has to be a very specific circumstance where that happens, and they can't do it at will. Whereas some of the dragons that I've introduced into the game have spell casting abilities, whether it's like a wizard spell list or a druid spell list or a warlock spell list or some type of spell list like that. And I think that has created a different dynamic. And we also, how I've seen and used dragons, and I took this straight from Critical Role, was the dragon taking the shape of a human and polymorphing into a human, and that was the human form was the one that was sneaking around and talking about, and that's how I introduced my version of Saphira to you guys, which is the big bad of y'all's probably like first 12 level arc, and how I introduced her and her party of other dragons who were also polymorphed, where they were all fighters, hobgoblins who had gathered with the army to attack Saphira and attack the dragons and take the fight to her for once. And they infiltrated and tried to have drinks with you guys and did have drinks with you guys, but there was still some suspicion. And then whenever the reveal came out, it was kind of an intense one, because they were like, oh snap, we had drinks with our big bad the night before. What the heck? So I really like that aspect. And then for dragons to be able to cast spells, I think it adds a very interesting dynamic and interesting component. One of the books, again, that I bought on Kickstarter is it is called I think it's called like Drakes of Valeria or something. I'm gonna have to look it up real quick. Hold on.
Oh man.
It is called.
Yeah, I think it's a cool thing that you have factions of dragons, because I think most literature I've read, it's like one by itself or like one and a baby or something like that.
Yeah.
But you have like, this is their hideout, more or less, and they sort of hunt in this area,
Yeah.
It's like there's some components of the wild beast
Yeah.
mentality of like, this is my territory and I'm going to be here and this is where I hunt and this is what I do, that I don't find is a part of much literature, because I feel like that gets left out.
It's called Great Worms of Draka. Well,
that was spot on.
Yeah. I was very close. And I don't remember the point that I was trying to make with it. You
were just bragging about having it, I think.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. I like that they had spells, and the way that they took the Great Worms of Draka, like the ancient dragons that are there, because it's supposed to be an adventure for level like 17 to 20 characters, which is why Saphira was so hard to kill. Was like it had different like HP had different parts of the body, because that's how big the dragon was supposed to be, is that you could not attack one part of the body and it's going to do damage to all of the body, and I thought that was really an interesting take. And then it had different abilities, once it started getting at, we used in the first arc of our Witcher campaign, we fought a dragon, and we were trying to ask, because like we didn't know how to ask, like, how is it looking, because it was our first D&D time. And the way that it was described is like, if it had a green health bar, like in a video game where it has like green, yellow, red, it's still in the green, or it's partially yellow, or it's looking red. So I thought that was very interesting. But there's also a game component to it in the Great Worms of Draka or Drakenheim, and it is whenever they like go into the next one, they have more attack points that they can spend to attack more or cast more spells or do different passive abilities. And I thought that was a really interesting way to run the dragon, is to have more passive abilities or to have weaknesses. As the hit points are going lower and lower, I tried to describe that like, oh, the leg looks broken, so like she's not going to be able to attack with that leg, or the wings are looking rough, so she's not gonna. Her fly speed is slower. So I tried my best to try and do that in the game running Saphira. So I think that's an interesting way in your stories to run a dragon, whether it's a game or a story or some type of writing, that whenever it takes damage, what part of the body is it taking damage on, and is it becoming more dangerous? Is it becoming less dangerous? I also added. It has like an attack and offense each turn. So if it had to attack, it would gain, it would lower its AC. So it would be more easy to hit, but it also increased its ability to hit and its damage output. And then it would go into a defensive ability where it didn't have as many action points to use, but its AC got boosted by like 5 or 6 or something like that. And that is very intense. If you're fighting a dragon, that's like, it's shelling up for this round to not take any attacks. So I like that aspect of the dragons. I feel like they're more versatile in the things that they can do, as far as spell casting, infiltrating, deceiving, and then there's also I can't remember. I think it's called like Niv Mints or something like that. It's a dragon in the Ravnica setting where it is the leader of a guild, and that was the intelligence 30, and it can do crazy stuff. Like it can hold 2 concentration spells, which in D&D you're not really able to do that. You can only concentrate on 1 spell at a time. But this dragon is so powerful and so intelligent that it can hold 2 concentration spells at the same time, and each one has its own concentration check. So it could fail one but succeed on another and still hold that concentration. So pretty cool, pretty interesting. There's a lot of different dragons, again, in D&D that if you just do a little bit of research on, you're like, dude, I want to incorporate something like that. Not even if it's all the elements, but something like that into our game or into your game or storytelling. So yeah, I think that's a lot of D&D and Aragon talk. The last kind of topic before we start adding how to use dragons in your game specifically is deities, the dragon deities. You can add a dragon deity. In Aragon, I don't believe there was a dragon deity. There's a lot of lore that gets dropped, and I didn't recognize any dragon deity there. But in Dungeons and Dragons, there's the one deity who created all the dragons. There's Io, and this is the dragon that created them all. And then his kids are Tiamat and Bahamut, who, if you're a regular player, you probably have heard those names more often. Bahamut being the good dragon deity and Tiamat being the 5-headed evil deity. And so you can add those in your game, the lore, or you can change the names and have some type of different, way to play them as gods in your game. And I want to say it's the Dragonomicon in the newest, or in the DM's Guild. It has a lot of dragon deities, and they're over like a bunch of random stuff, like the deity of greed, or the deity of anger, or the war god dragon. And having all these different dragons is like, oh snap, there is a whole pantheon of dragons as well. Let alone, like, if you're looking at D&D pantheons, there's so many deities you can be adding into your game. Or you can just grab 3 of them that are different, so that your players don't hear Tiamat and go, alarm bells going off, like, oh no, we're in for a fight no matter what. But like, they can approach it in a different way. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on like deities, the dragon deities, Tiamat, Bahamut, and Io. If you don't know, now you know. I hope I don't spoil anything for anybody by saying those things. So you touched on a little bit for using dragons as like just a monster to hunt. What are some other ways you would use dragons in your game or storytelling?
Well, I think if I was going to use it again, I think there's a couple ways. So for one, I find the trope of like rejected warrior to be kind of interesting, just because we've seen so many Marvel movies about it,
Mm-hmm.
Where it's sort of like they're off on their own and they've rejected society and they're no longer want to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of like the Skyrim dragon. You always find it at the top of a mountain or something, or it's chasing you, right? Like, you're not going to see it unless it sees you, kind of deal.
Yeah.
Like one of those where it's like there is a mission at some point that takes you in the area or takes you to see them, and it's sort of like you're going to go see the crazed hermit dragon. I feel like I would like to experiment with that. But I also feel like there is to be the leader of a certain society as a dragon is pretty cool. Because, well, I mean, for a lot of reasons, but if you're adding polymorph in, that changes a lot of things. So
Yeah.
because then they can interact with them a lot of times without knowing that it's a dragon, like you already said. But if you're taking away the polymorph function, I would say like having a I keep thinking of Bunraku, which is a great movie if you ever want to see it. But basically, there is a gang that the leader is so sequestered from the rest of the gang that only like his, I'm not sure the number, it's like top 7 killers ever interact with him.
Yeah.
At least that's the way the movie makes it seem. So So if it was something like that, where it's like you're part of a gang, you're like a low level person, and the gang's going to war, and it's like you've decided to participate in this, you're going to be on the front lines, and then you see like a dragon rise behind you. It's like that'd be a pretty sweet moment.
Yeah.
And then you get to see, and then it's like, okay, well, because you chose this path, now you see the way forward. Like as a DM, that I think that gives my players an opportunity to say, well, I guess we're gonna hang around then.
Yeah, right. For sure, for sure.
But if they feel like, well, I'm not gonna hang around with this place, then maybe there is a polymorphed dragon in the other one, and they see the great big dragon get slayed, and they're like, what's going on?
I feel like a polymorphed dragon has like some villainous intent. Well, maybe not completely villainous, but there's a level of intelligence that needs to happen for it to be polymorphed, because there are also other dragons that I've ran in our game where they are not. They probably have the ability and the magical prowess to polymorph, but it's such an insult to change their form as a dragon, because I think dragons are also very prideful, and I think that's one of the things in Aragon you get to hear the thoughts a lot more of Saphira, and how she is very prideful, even to the point where in a battle she loses a scale, and she was like, I cannot believe I lost this scale. Like, everyone's going to notice that I lost this scale, and everyone's going to think I'm not as beautiful because I lost this scale. And it's like, whoa, it's not even noticeable, but it's only maybe like the width and length of like a thumb. And but she was so prideful in that. And I feel like some dragons that you run will have that ability. So not every dragon wants to polymorph, even if they have the ability to, because they're so prideful and want to display how wonderful and beautiful they are. Like, there was a white dragon that you guys ended up having to hunt and kill because it was affecting trade routes and causing mayhem. And it was a good story point because I needed y'all to go there and have something to do and kill the time that was the in-world time that needed to happen. And but yeah, it was very prideful and did not want to polymorph out of what it was, so it fought you guys as a white dragon. And I think that is also pretty interesting, to be like a leader of stuff and not wanting to polymorph. And what does that bring? What if the dragon is not just a leader of other dragons, but is like the leader of a society? And I don't know why I think it, but I think of like some type of like, kind of like Aztec kind of empire, but like at the top of the temples is a dragon. They're like, instead of how you kind of typically think like they're worshiping like the sun or some other type of deities, they're worshiping the dragon that is protecting them. I think that is an interesting dynamic that can be brought.
Yeah, I think that's cool, but I also think like dragons, and maybe this is why we end up like villainizing them in all of our movies, is they're like a great way to have a consistent reminder of doom, right?
Yeah,
because like
sure.
if you just see it flying overhead, like especially if you've already ticked off the the group of people that it's in charge of, and then you see it overhead, like, and then it's gone the next day, but it's back the day after. You know what I mean? So you just start wondering, like, what's going to happen,
Yeah.
And that's a good, like, visual representation to say, oh, okay, this is escalating probably.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think the last way that I've used dragon, so we've talked about like using it as a villain or some boss or some type of adversity, and then of course the monster to hunt. I really enjoyed the prompt that I never got to write, and I would still love to write, but I told you the concept of what like my idea was for this story. Was you're hired to hunt down a dragon, and I told you my concept was some monster hunter who is like, I've heard of people say that they're gonna go and hunt dragons. They've never seen a dragon before, and it was never a dragon. It was always this lesser being, or maybe a drake, some small dragon that doesn't have wings, and goes on this hunt, and then he finds a little kid who is also like trying to hunt this dragon, but he's just clumsy. He doesn't know what he's doing. And he is saying like, I'm trying to get the reward for the bounty for hunting the dragon. And the monster hunter is looking at this kid and like, you have no idea what you're doing. He's like, but I need the money for my family. And like, there's this desire to like really want to kill it to provide for the family. And then as the story grows, whether, they have some encounters along the way, they start to grow a little bit closer, start to ask each other questions when they have to make camp. Cause it's, they know where the dragon's lair is. It's about a 5-day journey from the town. And the twist at the end of it all is the kid is the dragon that is sent to hunt, but is asking so many questions like, why are you trying to get me? Like, why are you trying to hurt me? And then at the end of it, there's either this confrontation. And again, I haven't finished the writing, so I didn't decide which way I wanted to go with it. But there's either a confrontation between them two as people who grew close together, and it's like, well, you're going to try and kill me, and now I'm going to protect myself. Like, there's no other way about this. I don't want to die. And they're both have to either fight each other, or the dragon is protecting something. Part of my idea was the person that put out the post is a farmer who is losing sheep, and the reason it's losing sheep is because there are dragon eggs and hatchlings that have hatched, and it needs to feed the other ones to continue the cycle of dragons. So and where that story is going to go, but like that's an interesting way to include a dragon polymorph that's not completely against your person, and maybe the monster hunter is like, nah, I'm not going to do that, or I'll say I slew you, but like we need to figure out something, and whether the cost is like a dragon hand or a dragon foot or something like that, So a couple interesting ways, like it's a monster to hunt, but what's the twist that you can put on it?
I don't know about a twist, but I had this idea, like, snow leopards up until like, I don't know, I want to say like 10 years ago. Don't quote me on that. I always say that. Anyway, up until like 10 years ago, weren't like filmed in the wild. Mm-hmm. Like they just are they're so good at smelling and seeing people coming.
Yeah.
that they just never caught sight of them.
Like Sasquatch.
Yeah, basically. It was the real life Sasquatch.
Yeah.
And so
Sasquatch.
Touche. Yeah. But I think it'd be interesting to have a dragon that is basically that character, where it's like people talk about it same way that we've never seen a dragon, obviously, but everybody knows the stories about them. It's like everybody's telling the legends of it. It's like the campfire story.
Yeah.
And then, there's like some big event where, a character loses a family member or something, and, this dragon comes down and like saves them, whatever.
Yeah. There's
some ceremony that the dragon comes down for, and like, gives you the blessing of its presence, right?
Yeah.
Just like would be a really cool moment, I think, to have in a story.
It's like the Dance of the Dragons in Avatar. When Zuko and Aang go to the Sunfire Island, and there are people who like worship the elements, and then the dragons come out as they're doing the dance when Aang's trying to like really learn firebending. But it's a surprise because the entire time leading up to that point, spoiler, we've been told that Uncle Iroh has killed the last dragons, and so he killed the last dragons, and then the reveal is these dragons that we've heard have been dead the entire series come out for the dragon dance and like kind of give them a blessing, and then they go away. They never are talked about or heard, or maybe not talked about, but we don't see them again for the rest of the series.
I'm gonna have to rewatch that. I forgot that.
Yeah. Oh, you finished Avatar, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%. But it's been a while. But yeah, I have.
It's always good to rewatch it.
Yeah.
You catch a lot of stuff that was missing the first time. So anyway, so we're talking about monsters to hunt. As a boss, as a villain. One other last thing, I have 2 dragon that polymorph as humans, as y'all's NPCs, that were once swords and are now allies to y'all.
And that was a great way to make them a passive character.
Yeah.
Like so you can interact with them, but they're not going to do all the shit that they can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which helps nerf it. I always talk to you about that because I feel like you give me so many, like you give all of us like so many magical items, and it's been years. So fair enough. We're gonna accumulate eventually, but at the same time, it's like, okay, I'm starting to feel like I'm pretty OP. And then so I talk to you about nerfing all the time, but it's like that was a brilliant nerfing of while still giving us like a boon, which is the weapon, it was still nerfed compared to what it actually is, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it sort
for
of
sure.
evolved into something that was even better.
Yeah.
which was really cool. It's like very Pokemon-esque, right?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Cool. So we've talked a lot about how to use dragons. We talked about, having dragons and NPCs, villains, boss, monsters to hunt.
Can I ask one more question
Yeah,
about
yeah.
NPCs?
Yeah.
If it were a quest giver,
hmm
like what kind of quest would it give? You know what I mean? Like what does it need from a humanoid to go do?
To keep its hands clean is my first thought. Like, I'm going to hire someone else to go and do the dirty work so that I don't have to. Or
Like somebody to go hunt for them, or like if it needs
scout
somebody
it
killed?
out, scout
Oh,
it
gotcha.
out, get someone killed, get information, so that it doesn't have to leave its lair, or its home residence.
Or like an easy theft,
Yeah.
where there's lots of guards and it'd have to fly down and get poked at and all that stuff, and it doesn't want to mess with it. So
Yeah. Or like an impossible task to see if the party can do it, and if it does, like, what are the results? What's the town now like hear about what happened? And then the dragon can hear and listen to the words on the street, and then see, like, were they successful? Were they not? How bad of an impact did they do? Did they kill enough guards to like make it the area weaker that it was trying to infiltrate, or something like that? So those are some kind of like, there's the quest, but what's the real objective is probably going to be somewhere over here.
So this is kind of messed up, but so what about there is a dragon that is missing one paw, and it's in its lair, and it's come across somebody just like on the road, whatever, somewhere nearby, and it's asking them to kidnap a very specific person and bring them back. And through the course of the mission, they realize that on the 40th birthday, that person's father disappeared mysteriously. And it just so happens that on the 40th birthday, every generation of that family, this dragon is killing because the first one cut off its paw or something.
Oh, that's crazy.
It's like
That's cool.
like that'd be so messed up. And then some, it forces your your player character is to then look at that and decide what they want to do, because it's very clearly like already kidnapping is pretty, but it's D&D, so you probably do it.
Yeah.
And then
Depends on your players.
Yeah.
and the campaign you run.
yeah, but then you get something like, okay, well that's messed up.
Yeah.
But they did cut off his foot. You know what I mean? Like you just get.
I
I
feel
think
like-
moral questions in D&D are so fun.
I think every DM wants to run like morally gray stuff too, every now and then, or like, but Adani's whole quest with the index was a deception from her patron. Like, she got her leg pulled the entire way, and she thought she was doing something right and something good and something that was going to be beneficial, but her patron got deceived as well. And so that's where we're at in the campaign, is her main quest that she's been talking about for years at this point, and what she's been wanting to do, which makes me as a person feel bad, but also like it is something that was a story point that I created many moons ago. Was something that I thought would be interesting and create some chaos.
And it was. And it did.
So I think morally gray quests are always something that a dragon can give, because I feel like a dragon's intention should never be known outright. Even Gladriel and Avaros, the two NPC dragons for you guys, their objectives and goals have never been asked, and so they help you guys because you freed them. But also, like, what are their motives? What do they want to do now? And that's why they kind of come and go as they please, because they are doing their stuff. So
Nice.
yeah. So lastly, we've talked about,
Obviously, there's so much you can do with these. Yeah.
yeah, there's so much, and there's so many great ways to do it, and
What's last?
If you want to, the listener want to ask us, how would you do dragons in this setting, or what would you do dragons for here or for this, or how would you make a dragon like this? Something we haven't thought of. Definitely reach out to us and let us know, and we will maybe put a Dragon 2.0 episode out.
Because we like to talk.
Yeah, we sure do. And so lastly, come to the question, dragons in Roween?
What? Okay, so this is the most pressing thing to me. is whenever I picture Roween, there is a certain color palette I have in mind. It's like a maroon or dark red,
Mm-hmm.
like a very desaturated green,
Mm-hmm.
or light blue.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that's all I see. Maybe some browns if you count the dirt, but it's like it would have to be one of those colors for the dragon, I feel like,
Yeah.
because that would be dope. Like just a very earthy colored dragon.
Yeah. Yeah. Even like a mix of all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, because then what I like about the mix of all the colors of like this greenish, black, almost like camouflage looking dragon is that when you get an experienced D&D player, they're going to be like, oh, but I think black and green both do acid damage. But, what kind of breath weapon are they going to do for D&D? But also you could definitely throw it on its head and just it be like a typical dragon, and it does fire damage and has a fire breath weapon. Because like in Aragon, there is a blue dragon and there's a black dragon, which is the big bad's dragon, and they both do fire breath. Like they're just a typical dragon that does fire. They don't do the D&D like ice and cold or forest damage or whatever. That some of the newer dragons are able to do, or psychic damage, or make people turn into mind flayers, which is one dragon breath ability that I have not used on you guys.
Oh my goodness. Terrifying.
Yeah.
I feel like it's got to look like the Aztec like jaguar, but like a dragon.
Yeah.
Like the big chunky head and like the just very rock like, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's how I'm picturing it, at least. And I feel like with how we've set up everything in Roween and how it is kind of a sparse place, I feel like it can't be any bigger than like an adult dragon.
Yeah.
Like it's got to be a smaller dragon, imposing but small.
Like a lean dragon, not like a big, huge, muscular dragon, but it's like agile.
Yeah, like a little bit more snake-like.
Yeah, or like a jaguar. I feel like that's the perfect kind of, it sneaks around and it's very quiet, like, and its claws like retract and come back in, and it's got wings that are like on its back almost, and whenever it does strike, like that's the only time you see the wings kind of go out, or even like, oh, it was creepy image, like like when a butterfly like kind of or a moth, like they open their wings like slowly, but like before it attacks, the wings just kind of like come out a little bit, and then once it prances like or pounces, it opens its wings and then uses the wings to like go and like jump further than it should, because like you expect to pounce. I mean, even cats can jump like 10 feet straight, right? So like what this thing could probably like pounce 30 or 40 feet. That's cool. You gotta throw that image up, and then
all right,
whenever we put that in, that's a dope image of
from iStock.
Dope. So yeah, that's and I feel like the dragon's got to be subtle, like more like a guardian dragon that like keeps people out and in. Ooh, what if it's like an ancient pet of the deity?
So okay. Some things are coming together here. So what if the people with the armor, like we've discussed that armor, are the only people that it lets out of the village?
That would be cool. And like for people to be sneaking in, or like for your adventuring party to come into the village is an anomaly. Like why did this dragon let it go? Oh, what if the dragon is like called away for something?
And well,
dealing with another issue that will come up later.
Yeah, so I like that. And I also have this idea too. Like what if your adventuring party, the way that they make it to the village is because they've been given like a trinket and a map that says like this is leading to this great treasure, this is where it comes from, and it's sort of like the original village's like totem.
That's cool. Yeah. It's
the
first rock from
the
rock where the kids hang out. But like, it's so ancient, like that it was like it's really an ancient piece. Like it's very valuable, but a lot of the rocks there are very valuable, but they just don't deem it as valuable because it's just the stone that's there.
Like maybe it's a kidney stone from the god when it passed away.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, it'd have to come from somewhere. But like maybe the first like court of kids, right?
Yeah.
Made a deal with some,
Yeah.
with
something.
the beast when they came in contact with it. You know, it's like, or maybe there was some kid that got lost in the jungle
Yeah.
and was stuck out there and then ran into the dragon, which then said it would keep him safe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just
I'm
getting excited.
A lot of good ideas there. Yeah, that's super fun to think about. So,
Roween, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
The Endless Project.
Yeah, sure is. Well, thank you everyone for listening to us talk about dragons for feels like over an hour. Hopefully you got something cool from this. Got some good inspiration. There are lots of cool dragons again in Aragon. Definitely recommended in the last episode. If you're a dragon lover like myself, read it. It's a good one. Dungeons and Dragons has plenty of great dragons. And then again, check Mr. Rex and then type dragons Mr. Rex. I believe it's Mr. and then RHEXX. Let me look it up so I can give the correct shout out, but I'm pretty sure that's it. Mr.
There's
Horex.
so many, like so much good dragon art out there too. So if you're lost, like just do a Google search or Pinterest or something, and you're gonna find some cool stuff that's gonna set your mind going.
Yeah, Mr. Rex, Mr. MR Rex RHEXX, and then type in dragon, and then there are a plethora of videos that are gonna be there, and you will get a lot of lore, and you can use it for anything. For me, I listened to Blue Dragons. That's when I figured out Blue Dragons, according to D&D, were the only group of dragons that are actually like a group of dragons and will be more than just like one or two, and then that created the whole arc for my campaign.
3-year arc.
It was being able to have more like 20-30 dragons in this little flock or whatever you call a herd of dragons, you know.
A school of dragons.
Yeah. I think like a group of falcons is called something really dope. I can't remember what it is.
It's ravens, right? It's a murder of ravens or something like that.
A murder of dragons coming at you. So definitely check those out. And then again, you know, dragons and mythology. If you want something a little bit more grounded in reality, that's not super fantasy. You know, these are cultures that believed in these dragons back in the day, and so you can check those out. Dragon Ball Z has some cool dragons. You know, that's also a plot point that you could add in, like when you find a dragon, maybe they can grant you a wish, and that is the only way that you can gain the ability to use the wish spell in your campaign. And it's not like it's something that I know a lot of DMs try and twist the wish spell on their players. I definitely don't do that, because my players have used wish like 10 times, and it's been super dope. It's been super clutch, and the encounters I push them to you have to use the wish spell. So and the world isn't broken. They haven't died from it kind of
Too many times.
And then again, Game of Thrones has its own set of dragons, and then there are just a myriad more. We named some movies, we named some shows, and of course there are even more shows and things that you could watch to learn about dragons. And if you ever want to talk to us about dragons, just let us know, and we will talk to you about dragons.
What if the stone that they take into the village is the soul stone, and that's just what happens to dragons when they die?
They turn into a soul stone?
Uh-huh.
That would be cool.
That would be cool, right? All right, on that note, thanks for joining us today for our dragon episode. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Like and subscribe.